Okay, today's chapter, we're dealing with chapter 6. Chapter 6, we're dealing with chapter 10. Chapter 10, it deals with emotions. This is a fun chapter. It's one of my favorites, I think, if we get this thing going. There we go. Okay. Yeah, chapter 10. Ekman, Sorensen, and Friesen in 1969 proposed that there is a set of basic emotions that are universally recognized around the world. And here they are. Anger. Happy. Smiley. Happy. Sad. Everybody has these emotions, no matter where you go in the world. That's anger. That's happy. That's sad. That's fear. That's surprise. That's disgust. There we go. So no matter where you go, whether it's in New Guinea or South Africa or Norway or Siberia, it really doesn't matter where you go. All of these emotions, all these facial expressions are the same, and they indicate the different emotions. There are some that are not universal, or there's a question as to whether they are universal. That one is contempt. Is it universal or not? We're not exactly sure. How about this one? Shame. Is it universal or not? Can you tell from looking at somebody's face whether they're feeling shame? This one, you can tell because of her red face, she is embarrassed. Is it universal? Do people's faces turn red? Interested. And actually, this is not a very good picture of interested. I couldn't find one where her pupils need to be dilated. As you can see, she doesn't really have dilated pupils. They are fairly small, but that shows interest. I had a friend that always seemed to find the lady that was interested in him if he was at a party. He would always go home with somebody that was would he got lucky a lot. Why? Because he could read women's eyes. He could tell if their eyes dilated when they looked at him and didn't dilate when they looked at other people. He knew that they were interested in him, and he picked up on that. He was really good at that. How about that? Pride. There we go. Is that universal or not? 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 And the answer is, I don't know. Though happiness has many different words, the expression for happiness does not vary globally. When shown posed facial expressions, each culture is best at identifying expressions from their own culture. Meta-analysis of cross-cultural studies on facial expressions, people were about 9% more accurate at identifying people from their own culture. So you're probably a lot better at identifying the emotions being shown by Dene people than I would be. I'm probably better at identifying what white people are thinking from their facial expressions. About 9% better. That's the average anyway. So that's just the way it works. Adams and colleagues in 2010 had participants guess what emotions were being displayed by just showing them pictures of eyes. The participants were better at identifying emotions of people from their own culture. They also noted that they showed more activity in their amygdala when they were shown eyes from people from their own culture who were demonstrating fear. So the amygdala, of course, gives you the extreme emotions, and because they recognized it in the faces of or the eyes of their own people, they showed fear as well. The differences in facial expressions of emotions across cultures are distinct enough that people can reliably guess that the nationality of targets who are expressing emotions, even though the targets are of fairly similar cultural backgrounds. An American can guess better than chance whether a target is from the United States or Australia, and I'm going to give you that opportunity in just a second. This is a lady from Australia. Does she look any different from any other white person in Canada or the United States? And the answer is, well, let's see. Okay, I have a picture of 4 different individuals. Oops, there we go. 4 different individuals. One of these individuals is from Australia, and 2 of them are from Wisconsin. Vertebral is in Wisconsin, and one of these is from Sholo, actually. So if you can identify the person from Sholo and you can identify the person from Australia, then probably you're doing pretty well, okay? This is an old student of mine when I was at Ashford. Two of these individuals were students of mine, and one of them was a psychology. The Australian was a psychology major. So if you have made your selection as to who's from Sholo, Arizona, and who is from Wisconsin and who is from Australia, I will show you the person from Australia. This is the lady from Australia. She's playing professional soccer now in Australia. This young lady is from Wisconsin, and so is this young lady is from Wisconsin, and this is the young lady from Sholo, as weird as that may seem. Okay, so if you were able to identify them, then yes, who was it? Adams and colleagues were correct as far as that is concerned. And if you see that young lady is Australian and you see this young lady is Australian, I'm not sure why you would, I don't know, if there are any other differences. A lot of people from Wisconsin are of German and Scandinavian descent, so you might have identified the blonde hair, but she has brown hair, and she's from Wisconsin as well. Okay, thank you. That was fun. The same researchers did a study earlier comparing Japanese participants with Japanese Americans. Results were similar to those for the Americans and the Australians. When the faces showed emotions, they were easier to read. Neutral faces were much harder to read. So if we were looking at extreme, at emotions, then it was easier to tell if they were Japanese American or whether they were Japanese. And this is kind of an interesting picture because this lady is from Japan, and this lady is from Japan, and this lady is Japanese American. Baron Cohen et al. In 2001 and Krause et al. In 2010 found that people of lower socioeconomic background were more accurately identified facial expressions of emotion. The lower the status, the more the individuals must attend to facial expressions in order to know if they're in trouble or not. So there you go. So the lower the socioeconomic status, the better they are at identifying emotions. Different cultures will attend to different parts of the face to read expressions. The Japanese find emotions socially disruptive and thus are more likely to try to display a neutral face than Americans. But it is hard to control muscles around the eyes, so the Japanese focus on the eyes to determine emotion. Research by Yuki et al. In 2007 attempted to determine where Japanese and American focus was when trying to read facial expressions. The Japanese read facial expressions from the eyes. Americans read facial expressions from the mouths. Now, European Americans are more likely to try to read the whole face than the Japanese and are more likely to include mouths prominently in their cartoon art. Japanese cartoon art shows dominant eyes and sometimes no mouths at all, as in anime. And as you can see, this is, I don't remember what these shows are. Anyway, as you can see, she's barely got a mouth at all. Hers is just a line. Hers is just a line. But this is an American cartoon, and as you can see, the mouths are quite prominent in all of them, including the dog. This is another King of the Hill. The mouths are very important. That's how we can tell what's going on. The Simpsons are almost, their heads are almost all mouths, and the eyes are non-distinct. And there we go. There's a Japanese art. My little kitty has no mouth, but she does have eyes. And that's another Japanese cartoon. An American cartoon, American Dad, big mouths. The heads are almost all mouths again. And there's a Japanese cartoon where these two people are speaking, and that's why there is a hole there, but this individual isn't speaking, and they don't have a mouth at all, as strange as that is. I do not understand what this is. I've seen this looking at Japanese television shows. They'll take a handkerchief and they'll tie it under their nose, and the handkerchief is back here. It's just like this. This is a handkerchief, and he's got it tied under his nose. I've never seen that any place except in Japan. Of course, I lived there for 6 months, so I'm a little bit more sensitive to these things. While researchers argue that all cultures have a similar capacity to read facial expressions, cultures tend to maintain varying display rules for facial expressions. Display rules are culturally specific rules that govern which facial expressions are appropriate in a given situation and how intensely they should be exhibited. And the joke is absolutely no gut responses, gut feelings, gut checks, or anything else gut. And that's according to the management. Some cultures encourage people to display their emotions in clear, if not exaggerated form. In certain Arab populations, it is dishonorable if a man does not respond to an insult with a great demonstration of anger. That doesn't mean that he wants to fight. That doesn't mean that he is going to do anything about his anger. He just has to display the anger. Otherwise, he loses face. And this is one of the reasons why, if you have been watching what was going on before the Iraq and Afghanistan wars, there was a lot of fist shaking and a lot of angry rhetoric. Why were they doing that? They were doing that to maintain their status in that country. If they didn't show anger when the United States did something that should have made them upset, if they didn't show a lot of anger, if they didn't overly display their anger, then they could have lost their position in their country. The Kaluli of New Guinea tend to show their emotions particularly intensely and dramatically, and this is according to Schiefelin in 1979. These are the Kaluli. As you can see, they're pretty upset. Among the Alaskan native Utku, public expressions of anger are strongly condemned. The Balinese have a preference for emotional smoothness, where the emphasis is on avoiding strong displays of emotional feelings for both positive and negative emotions. When Americans are embarrassed, excuse me. When Americans are embarrassed, they tend to make a facial expression where their face turns red, they close their eyes, and they look down because they are embarrassed. In India, when someone is embarrassed, they literally bite their tongues, an expression that is not recognized by people in the United States. Voluntarily produced facial expressions like a wink and a false smile suggest the existence of cultural display rules that lead people to express idiosyncratic facial expressions known as ritualized displays. And of course, we can tell the real smile from the fake smile. This is the Beebs. And here's another individual, and we can see the fake smile from the real smile. Well, how do we know the difference? It's usually the crinkle of their face, of their eyes. See, you can see the eyes are closed. A smile where they don't use their eyes, that's a fake smile. The facial feedback hypothesis states that the expressions on our face reflects our true feelings. Strack et al. Sought to prove the hypothesis by forcing the face to form a frown or smile by holding a pencil in their mouths while watching a comedy. The researchers discovered that those in the smile mode found the humor in the comedy funnier. And I tried this. I did this experiment. This was originally done in 1988. Strack is a German. So this research came out of came out of West Germany. In 1988, Germany was still split. So I tried this in one of my classes at Ashford. I showed Rugrats. It was a television show we were all watching, and I had them every 10 minutes. I had them write down whether they thought it was funny or not. And lo and behold, the people that were holding the uh, pencil in their teeth, they found the Rugrats a lot funnier than the people that just had it in their lips. See, this is a frown and this is a smile. Matsumoto et al. In 1988 asked American and Japanese participants about an experience where they expressed select emotions. The Americans reported feeling those emotions stronger, longer, and more intensely than the Japanese. Mesquita and Karasawa in 2002 had Japanese and American students complete questionnaires indicating emotions they were experiencing a number of times during the day. The Japanese were 3 times more likely to indicate they had no emotions than Americans. It's a collectivist society. They're supposed to control their emotions. So the Japanese were showing no emotion whatsoever. The Americans were always feeling something. McCallums et al. In 2012 and Ryder et al. In 2008 found that East Asians are less attentive to their visceral states when compared with Westerners. So we're always thinking about how we're feeling. The Japanese, not so much. The Chinese, not so much. The Koreans, not so much. Zokoto in 2010 found that Ghanaians attend to their emotions less than Americans do. From these studies, researchers have hypothesized that masking emotions in East Asia might be leading East Asians to experience fewer and less intense emotions than Americans. Research in the West has indicated that people with hostile tendencies are at increased risk for cardiovascular disease. The reason hostility leads to cardiovascular disease is that hostile people have more occasions when they need to inhibit their anger. However, in cultures where anger is not expressed, people tend to experience anger less intensely. This hypothesis was tested looking at European and Chinese Canadians. Given potentially anger-inducing scenarios, the Chinese Canadians found the scenarios less anger-inducing than did the European Canadians. The most common reaction by the European Canadians from the anger-provoking scenarios was to openly express their anger. For Chinese Canadians, their most common response was to reappraise the situation in a less angry way or to make efforts to distract themselves from the anger-provoking event. The European Canadians felt much anger and tried to express it openly. The Chinese Canadians adopted strategies to minimize their anger response and thus felt less anger. Anderson and Lennon in 2006 measured the blood pressures of their Canadian participants. Both Chinese Canadian and European Canadian blood pressure slowly returned to baseline levels. Chinese Canadian blood pressure returned to normal faster than European Canadians. Chinese Canadians experienced their anger less intensely than the European Canadians and were more comfortable with strategies that served to reduce their experience of anger, whereas the European Canadians suffered from physiological consequences if they did not openly express their anger. Compared with Americans, negative emotions in East Asians are associated with fewer negative health outcomes and less of a neural response when suppressing their emotions, indicating that it is not as effortful for them to suppress negative emotions. The English language has 2,000 different emotion words. English speakers are cued by their language to express their emotions. The Chewang of Malaysia have only 8 words that describe emotion, and only 3 represents Ekman's basic emotions of anger, shame, and fear. Laganda speakers from Uganda do not make a distinction between sorrow and anger. The Gidjingali of Aborigines of Australia use one word, Guru Kaj, to express both shame and fear. Samoans use one word, Alofa, to express both love and pity. The Utku of Alaska do not distinguish between feelings of kindness and gratitude. The Ifaluk in Micronesia do not even have a word for emotion, instead lumping all internal states together. Despite the fact that English is a Germanic language, there is no equivalent word in English for the German word Schadenfreude, feelings of pleasure that one gets when witnessing the hard times of someone else. And of course, this is what Schadenfreude is. Pain looks great on other people. And of course, this is Charles Schulz. Schulz, of course, is a German name. I don't know if Schadenfreude, if German Americans recognize Schadenfreude. I was watching a video the other day. It was really kind of interesting to me because I lived in Germany for 3 years. We're stationed in Germany for 3 years, so I have a knowledge base dealing with Germans. And it was a lady that was German who was living in Cincinnati. She is from Germany. She's from Munich in Germany, and she's been living in Cincinnati, going to school at the University of Cincinnati for 5 years. She's getting her master's degree now, and she had this video where she was talking about the differences between Americans and Germans, and one of them was this word Schadenfreude. She was actually going through words that in German don't have an English equivalent. And the first one, of course, was Schadenfreude. She said this is very real in Germany, that people have, they find pleasure in other people's pain. That sounds fairly sadistic, but the reality is that they see success, if they are successful, and they see somebody else that fails, it makes them feel good. So that is the idea behind Schadenfreude. She admitted that the Germans have this emotions, and Americans don't. They feel pity. They root for the underdog. In Germany, they always root for the person that should win. If they don't win, then people think, oh, okay, well, that's not what should have happened. But I've watched a lot of sports in Germany, and they like to see a team get massacred. That makes them feel good. I was there from 79 to 82, and at that time the United States had the North American Soccer League, and a team came in. The Dallas Stars came in to play against Kaiserslautern, and I went to the game. We got free tickets because I was on the base, so I went to the game, and I'll tell you what, it was like 8-0, and every time the Germans scored another goal, the crowd just erupted, and the more goals they scored, the bigger the massacre, the louder it got, and by the end they were high-fiving everybody and they were slapping everybody on the back. Because this was theoretically this was a friendly, but it was just they dominated the whole game, and they had this one player that he was a defenseman, but he was the leading scorer in the Bundesliga, and he scored 4 goals that night, and every time he scored, people just went crazy. But it was a massacre. Why not take him out? Let the second string come in. No. They were going to pour it on. Schadenfreude. They feel good about somebody else's pain. The Javanese have a term iklas, which refers to somewhat pleasant feeling caused by frustration. It's a weird idea. In Japanese, ame captures the relatively pleasant feelings that one experiences when allowed to emphasize his or her dependence on one another. It often involves the tendencies to behave inappropriately toward a close other as a gesture to demonstrate how secure the relationship is. And a lot of times in Japan, and this is a picture, I typed Ame into the computer and I was looking for pictures, and this is a good example. She's bathing and she's using her husband as a stool. Um, I'm not sure what this other picture is. Anyway, and this is so in Japan you see men insulting women, treating them very poorly, and the woman is subservient to the man. And this is Ame. This is the idea that despite the fact that he's treating her, it's a form of codependency, I guess, but it doesn't really exist in the United States. But you'll see the husband yelling at his wife and slapping his wife and pushing his wife, and she has to walk 3 steps behind him. You know, the whole, and she's the two are dependent on one another, and the Japanese see this as very positive, that it's a strong relationship because he can treat her that way and she will stay with him. Of course, in the United States, all kinds of interesting things might happen. I guess this is her up here, and she's using him as a stepladder or something. I don't know. Uchida et al. In 2009 compared the emotional responses from athletes after an Olympic victory. Comparing Japanese and U.S. statements, the researchers determined that the Japanese feel especially good when they're focusing on how their emotional experiences lead them to connect with others. Americans feel especially good when they're dwelling on those emotional experiences that distinguish them from others. So the Japanese said their victory made them closer to other people. The Americans said that it separated them from other people because they were unique. They wanted to demonstrate their uniqueness. In 2013, Oishi and colleagues examined dictionaries for the definition of happiness in 30 different countries. They found that luck was included in the definition in all but the United States, Spain, Argentina, Ecuador, India, and Kenya. And we're talking about happiness here, or we're talking about luck. So, they were looking for the word happiness, and they found the word luck in all the dictionaries except these. Now, why did I show this symbol? This is a symbol. A Chinese symbol for luck is the cat with its hand raised for some reason. It's an East Asian thing. People who live in countries where happiness is defined as good luck report feeling less happy than those where luck is not seen as an important part of the definition of happiness. You don't have to be lucky to be happy in the United States, Spain, Argentina, Ecuador, India, and Kenya. Looking at definitions across time in the United States dictionaries, the researchers discovered that the definition of happiness included the concept of good luck until 1961. Subjective well-being is the feeling of, so things changed in 1961. Before 1961, we felt that we needed to be lucky. We needed to feel lucky to be happy. But after 1961, happiness had nothing to do with luck. Subjective well-being is the feeling of how satisfied one is with one's life. The nations that score the highest on subjective well-being are Scandinavian and Nordic countries, much of Latin America, various English-speaking countries, and Western Europe. Happiest people in the world, Scandinavians. For some reason, every time they do a happiness scale to see which country is the happiest, it's always Norway, Sweden, Denmark, and Finland. The least subjectively happy people are people of the former Soviet republics and some of the impoverished countries in Africa and South Asia. This is Ukraine. These are Ukrainians. That's a Ukrainian flag. So it's the people of Eastern Europe primarily. They did a similar study of the regions in the United States and found that the Mountain West and New England had the highest subjective well-being. The area with the lowest subjective well-being was the Southeast, where there is a lot of racial tension. And this is an old picture from So the civil rights movement in the 1950s and 1960s. This is the 1950s, I can tell from the truck. Many factors contribute to the overall satisfaction that people have with their lives. One is wealth. People who live in countries in which they have access to enough wealth to easily meet the basic needs of life tend to be considerably more satisfied than those who do not. Looking at the history of subjective well-being, only once a country has an average gross domestic product of at least 40% of that of the United States, there's no longer any pronounced relation between money and subjective well-being. And this is according to Diener et al. In 1995. Now, Diener is an interesting name. And the only reason I mention this is because I ran into this when I was working in medicine. Diener means helper. It means servant. When I was working in the morgue, we were doing autopsies. The person that assists the pathologist is referred to as a diener. I just thought I'd mention that. Money can buy a lot of happiness if you're struggling to survive. However, it has much less impact if your basic needs have already been met. Those countries that promote human rights the most tend to have the happiest citizens. Those countries in which people live under the constant threat of being thrown in jail for suspicions of plotting against the government are not as happy. The overall equality among people in a country is associated with greater subjective well-being. And the reason this is a runner from Ethiopia, he won a race, and this is what he did. And the reason he did that is because in Ethiopia, people are arrested for saying things that go against the government. Of course, if we did that, then during the Trump administration, CNN would have been thrown in jail. And now that Biden is the president, of course, Fox News would be shut down, and all those people would go to jail. That doesn't happen in the United States, of course, but it does happen in Ethiopia, and that's why he's doing this. The Scandinavian and Nordic nations have various social policies to minimize differences in opportunities among its citizens. These nations have some of the happiest citizens in the world. It seems people feel good when their rights are not threatened, and they have opportunities that are comparable to those of their neighbors. And this is a picture of a Scandinavian gentleman. Right now, the Scandinavians are the tallest people in the world. Why that is, Switzerland, the Netherlands, and the Scandinavians are all the tallest people in the world. Their average height is taller than in the United States. It's over 6 feet. It's like 6'1" in most of those countries. The United States, it's 5'10". So we're little shrimps, I guess, compared to the Scandinavians. People in individualistic societies were far more likely than those in collectivist societies to base their life satisfaction on how many positive emotions they are experiencing. Positive emotions appear to be seen as the basis of a good life in individualistic societies. Oishi in 2002 looked at how Asian American and European Americans interpreted their past. Oishi had people record the week they were having. I'm not talking about their historical past. I'm talking about, what happened yesterday afternoon. Oishi had people record the week they were having and then asked them to remember the week. While the two groups had similar weeks, the European Americans remembered their week as more positive than it actually was. The Asian Americans remembered their week accurately. Follow-up research by Rogers and colleagues in 2004 found that European Americans appear to be operating under an implicit theory that they should be happy. Asian Americans seem to operate under the theory that emotional experience should be balanced and consist of both positive and negative emotions. Researchers feel that it is quite possible that many of the observed cultural differences in subjective well-being are based on the different theories that people from different cultures have about how they should be feeling about their lives. How do we know what we're supposed to feel? How do we know this? Who tells us how we're supposed to feel? And the answer is, and this is something we just discovered from Facebook algorithm, the truth is that we listen to other people. Other people tell us what we're supposed to feel. Songs tell us what we're supposed to feel. Social media tells us what we're supposed to feel, how we're supposed to react to things. Television shows, movies, all of these things tell us who we're supposed to be and how we're supposed to react. Let me give you a personal example. Once upon a time, I was married to a young lady. We had 2 children, and she left me. Well, what was I supposed to do? What does society tell me I'm supposed to do? What does music tell me I'm supposed to do? How was I supposed to react to this? And you can answer this in a lot of different ways if you want. Should I have gone out and gotten drunk? Should I have put my fist through the wall? Should I have gone, oh, well, you know, that's just the way things are? What does music tell you to do? Music tells you that you're supposed to be sad. Well, we hadn't been getting along very well, so maybe I should have felt happy. And eventually I did feel happy, but I tried to react the way I was supposed to. My friends came over, and guess what they did? They took me out to get drunk because that's the way they thought I was supposed to react. So who do we listen to? Do we listen to Facebook? Do we listen to, of course, this is before Facebook. This is back in the 70s. So the only examples I had were music and television shows and movies, television shows, and music. No social media. Anyway, I got over it. Don't worry. Everything worked. But, you know, to this day, I still like listening to breakup songs. Why would that be? What's wrong with me? You know, is it because breakup songs are better than other songs? Or is it that I'm supposed to feel this way? And that's a question that we have to ask ourselves and answer for ourselves. How do we know how to react? Was I supposed to go out and get drunk? I've been drunk 3 times in my life, and that was one of the times when I went out with my friends. And they said, here, drink this, it'll make you forget. Well, that's not going to do me any good. I've got 2 kids at home that I need to take care of, and I certainly can't take care of them when I'm drunk. Anyway, I realized that was, for one thing, I don't like alcohol. I don't think it tastes very good. I don't like the reaction. I like being in control of, you know, myself. So I didn't drink anymore. I didn't get drunk anymore. I got drunk one more time. Okay, I got drunk one more time. But it didn't have anything to do with trying to forget. It had to do with something else. I wasn't reacting to anything. The reason I drank was because I was out with somebody and they were drinking, and I thought, oh, you know, if I drink, maybe I'll seem more attractive to this person, you know, which is another stupid reason for doing something stupid. And as it turned out, all I did was puke. So everything turned out okay. Nothing happened. I didn't seem more attractive to that person. As the drunker I got, the more she disappeared. So, in a study by Falke et al. In 2010, Canadian students were asked to choose between a video game that was fun and one that boosted thinking skills. The results indicated that European Canadians were more likely to choose the fun game, whereas Asian Canadians were more likely to choose the useful game. In the same study, students were asked to select university courses from a fictitious set of course descriptions. European Canadians were more likely to choose the courses that sound like fun and interesting compared with the Asian Canadians who focus more on the perceived utility of the courses. Once upon a time, I had a student from Bangladesh. This individual came over here. He got a visa, a student visa, to study, and he was one of my students in Gen Psych. And at the time, he was a computer major. And he came to me one day, and of course, I talk about fun and enjoying what you're studying. I used to talk about this all the time. And he was one of my students, and he came to me, and he was distraught. He said, I don't know what to do. I hate computers. I said, why in the world are you studying something that you hate? He said, because it's useful. And I convinced him that he needed to do something that he enjoyed. Because if he didn't, then when he started working, that it would be work rather than, something that he enjoyed. so so then he started studying environmental science, and he kind of liked environmental science. It was useful. He liked it, and then he came to me one day. He took one of my psychology classes, biological psych, I think, uh, physiological psych, and he came to me and he said, I like psychology so much more than environmental science. Environmental science is like, in psychology, you can change people. But in environmental science, it's like knocking your head against a stone wall. And I said, why are you studying something that feels like you're banging your head against the wall? You need to study something that you enjoy. So he became a psychology major, and he just finished his PhD in industrial organizational psychology, which is kind of interesting, because we didn't even have a class in industrial organizational psychology, but he decided that he needed to be as functional, as useful as possible. And if he went back to Bangladesh and he was a psychologist, people would go, you care about what people think? You care about how people feel? It's a collectivist society. So this isn't, everybody's supposed to feel the same way. And he said, well, so he studied something that would be considered useful if he went back to Bangladesh, and that he could impress his friends with. He's This year he's teaching at the University of Minnesota Duluth, but it's only a 1-year deal, so I'm guessing he's going to find a job someplace else. Anyway, he's got a PhD. He'll find a job someplace. Don't worry. But I just found it interesting that here he comes from a collectivist country, and he needed to find a job that was useful, that his friends would feel was useful. Anyway. He's a success story. He got his PhD. And the classes that he enjoyed the most were the ones that didn't have anything to do with industrial or organizational psychology. As much fun as that is. Asian Canadians seem less interested in the idea of doing things for the sake of anticipated positive feeling compared with European Canadians. Life appears to be less about a pursuit of happiness for people with Asian cultural experiences than it does for Westerners. So we're always looking for a good time, and they are looking to be useful. And that's what was happening with my student from Bangladesh. European Americans report experiencing many positive emotions and less depression. East Asians who report having many positive emotions are no less at risk for depression than those East Asians who report having very few positive emotions. And that's according to Liu et al. In 2011. Positive feelings do not seem to carry the same protection against depression in East Asia as it does for European Americans. Grossman and Cross in 2010. Something about depression. I was watching a video yesterday. It was Bella Poarch. She's that TikTok star who had the most views last year. Anyway, she was talking about her military career. She was in the United States Navy, and after 4 years, it was a 6-year enlistment with a 4-year commitment. 6-year commitment with a 4-year enlistment. That's what it was. Anyway, after 4 years in the Navy, evidently she lived a very isolated life. She wasn't allowed to do anything when she was in high school, so she decided to join the Navy. Her brother joined the Navy, it's the U.S. Navy, so she did too. She was born in the Philippines, I think, but she lived most of her life in the United States. Real interesting story. But while she was in the Navy, she became depressed. And this was a recurring problem. And one of the things that she did when she was depressed was that she would get tattoos. And now she's has a lot of tattoos. But she was talking about being depressed. And when it came time for her to re-enlist, the Navy rejected her application. And the reason that they rejected her application was because she'd been to mental health over and over again about her depression. And after she got out of the Navy, she got a lot more tattoos. When she was in the Navy, and that was her trying to make herself feel better by getting pins with ink in them stuck in her skin, I guess. Grossman and Cross. So that I was just talking about depression, and of course the Philippines is an Asian country. So it may have been the fact that here she is. She's trying to balance. She's living in two different cultures. She's Filipino, but she's living in the United States. She's Asian, but she's in a Western culture, and she just couldn't balance it herself very well. And now she's a star, a TikTok star. Grossman and Cross in 2010 investigated Russian and American personalities through vignettes and discovered that Russians were more likely to identify with the stereotype of Russian brooder than were Americans. In other words, Russians brood. They think deep thoughts, and they have unpleasant looks on their faces. And this is a picture of Russians, by the way. And as you can see, people aren't very happy. Reflective Americans were more prone to depression, but Russian brooders tended toward less depression, which doesn't make any sense at all. You would look at all these people's faces, and you'd say, wow, they must tend toward depression. But the reality is, it's not the way it works. Russian brooding, Russia is a fairly negative place, and the way that they deal with their depression or with their negative ideas is by brooding. And if they are thinking about it, then they don't feel it so much. That was me trying to kill a fly. Okay. Brooding over negative emotions, while common in Russia, does not lead to Russians feeling depressed as it does for Americans. So if you were from the United States and you were brooding like the Russians are or do, you would become depressed. But the Russians, it doesn't work that way. They're able to dissipate their depression by thinking about it. Psych and colleagues in 2006 proposed the notion of ideal effect, the kinds of feelings that people desire. They are the emotions that people are trying to achieve, so they structure their lives in order to increase the likelihood that they will experience these emotions. That's why if the only way that you can feel happy is by getting drunk, that you go to the bar a lot. For most Americans, ideal effect contains positive emotions that are high in arousal, whereas for most East Asians, ideal effect contains positive emotions that are low in arousal. So Americans want to feel excited. I'm going to watch the Giants play the Dodgers tonight. I'm going to be get aroused when the Giants do well and the Dodgers do poorly. That's what I'm looking for. I'm going to watch that ball game so that I can feel strong emotions, so that I can feel high arousal. But if I were Asian and I felt real strongly about that game, I wouldn't watch it. Psych et al. In 2006 looked at children's storybooks and found that American storybooks showed faces that were excited and had bigger smiles than the storybooks for children in Taiwan. Now, as you can see, these are Taiwanese children. They have just as big as smiles as anybody in the United States. But the difference is their storybooks don't tell them that they need to smile all the time. American storybooks tell our kids, tell the Western children, that they need to smile, that smiling is good. The researchers discovered that European American preschool children preferred pictures of excited faces more than the Taiwanese preschoolers did, and they also felt more similar to the characters who were engaged in high arousal activities. The Taiwanese children felt more similar to the characters engaged in low arousal activities. And of course, this is meditation in a Taiwanese school. Everybody's doing pretty well except these guys back in the back. It's always the kids in the back. Looking at the Gospels of the Bible and Buddhist texts, Miao and Sepla in 2007 found that high arousal states were encouraged more in the Christian text, whereas low arousal states were encouraged more in Buddhist texts. Some Christian sects include enthusiastic religious practices such as jumping, shouting, and applause, and snake handling. These are rattlesnakes. That is not very, they're very common, of course. But the Pentecostal faith, the Pentecostal sect of Christianity, lots of jumping and shouting and speaking in tongues. Buddhist religious practices emphasize meditation and calming of one's mind. European Americans are more likely to engage in active individual activities such as jogging and rollerblading, whereas Asian Americans are more likely to pursue more passive activities such as sightseeing and picnicking. It's really kind of fascinating if you watch Asian tourists in the United States. They like to be taken from one place to another, and they like to take pictures. This is a nice passive thing to do, to take pictures. Americans they want to run to the top of the mountain, and the Asians want to take a picture of the mountain rather than run up to the top of the mountain. Really kind of fascinating. Of course, I've lived all over the world, so I get to see this. In Paris, you're in Paris, and you're a sightseer, and you've got just a whole slew of Asian tourists that are taking pictures of the Eiffel Tower. Whereas the Americans, they don't want to take the elevator. They want to walk up all the way to the top of the Eiffel Tower, which, of course, when I was there, you couldn't do that. They were working on the top portion of it. But we walked up as far as we possibly could. But there, down below, all these Asian, Chinese, and Japanese tourists, and they were taking pictures. Okay, I can't show this video. I was going to show you Quiet Riot. I can't show you this video because if I do, it's copyrighted and they will block my video. So I'm not going to show it. European Americans are more likely to prefer fast tempo and exciting music, whereas Chinese are more likely to prefer calm music. I was going to show you Quiet Riot. So you can listen to Quiet Riot if you like. You can click on this and it will take you there. But if I show you that video, this lecture will get stuck. Among Westerners, interpersonally and disengaging acts feel especially good. Subjective well-being is associated with positive feelings. People operate under the implicit theory that more positive feelings are better. Positive emotions serve as a bulwark against depression, and high arousal positive emotions are preferred. And this is, of course, why I'm going to watch the game tonight. Not because I'm depressed, but because I want to see the Giants beat the Dodgers. They're ahead of them by one game. As far as the year is concerned, the Giants have won one more game than the Dodgers have. So the two teams are so close. I mean, if you look at their pitching, it's so close. The hitting is really close. So we'll see what happens. I may be disappointed. I may be crying tomorrow, but right now I'm really looking forward to the game. Among East Asians, interpersonally engaging acts feel especially good. Subjective well-being is associated with appropriate role behaviors. People operate under the implicit theory that it is good to experience both positive and negative feelings. Positive emotions are not associated with less depression, and low arousal positive emotions are more sought after. And I don't remember what this is, so I'm going to click on it, and what is it? Oh, it's another. I can't really show you this one either, but this is Japanese, the Japanese top 10 songs. So you can go back to this and click on this, and you can see these things. You guys can watch it, and it won't be a copyright violation. but if I show it to you, it will be a copyright violation. Whoops, I'm going the wrong way. And that is the end of the lecture. So if you want to see Quiet Riot and you want to see the top 10 in Japan, it's really kind of fascinating comparing the two types of music. Japanese music is a lot more subdued. I think there's one song that would be considered very active. And of course, this is, he's screaming through the whole thing. So Quiet Riot, kind of fascinating. These two individuals have overdosed to death. So the two in the back have overdosed to death. Anyway, not important. I'll see you guys next time. I think we have another. The last test is after the last chapter, so we don't have a test this week. Talk to you later. That was fun. I really enjoyed this class.